Human emotional experience emerges from a coordinated network of brain regions that continuously evaluate internal states and external social signals. At the center of this system is the amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure deep within the brain that acts as an early detection system for emotionally relevant information. The amygdala rapidly scans incoming sensory input, facial expressions, tone of voice, body posture, and contextual cues to determine whether something in the environment signals reward, safety, or potential threat. This evaluation happens extremely quickly, often before conscious awareness, which is why emotional reactions can occur almost instantly. When the amygdala detects something emotionally significant, it activates neural pathways that prepare the body and mind to respond. Closely connected to the amygdala is the hippocampus, a structure responsible for forming and retrieving memories, particularly those associated with emotional experiences. The hippocampus provides context to emotional reactions by linking present situations with past events. For example, if a person previously experienced warmth and support in a particular type of social interaction, the hippocampus helps the brain recognize similar cues and interpret them as positive. Conversely, if past interactions were stressful or threatening, the hippocampus can bias the brain toward caution or heightened sensitivity. This partnership between the amygdala and hippocampus allows emotional responses to be informed by personal history, shaping how individuals interpret relationships and social environments. The prefrontal cortex plays a crucial regulatory role within this emotional network. Located in the front portion of the brain, it is responsible for higher cognitive functions such as planning, reasoning, impulse control, and emotional regulation. While the amygdala generates fast, automatic emotional reactions, the prefrontal cortex evaluates these responses and determines whether they are appropriate for the situation. This top-down regulation allows individuals to pause, reconsider, and choose more thoughtful responses instead of reacting purely on impulse. For example, during a disagreement, the amygdala may trigger frustration or defensiveness, but the prefrontal cortex can reinterpret the situation and guide behavior toward calmer communication. Communication between these regions occurs through complex neural pathways that constantly exchange information. When emotional stimuli are detected, the amygdala sends signals not only to the prefrontal cortex, but also to other systems involved in attention, motivation, and bodily responses. The hypothalamus, for instance, can activate physiological changes such as increased heart rate or hormonal release, preparing the body to react to emotionally significant events. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex integrates emotional information with goals, values, and long-term considerations, shaping behavior in ways that support social cooperation and relationship stability. Another important aspect of emotional brain circuits is their sensitivity to learning and adaptation. The connections between the amygdala, hippocampus, and prefrontal cortex are highly plastic, meaning they change with experience. Repeated social interactions strengthen certain pathways, making emotional responses more predictable and efficient over time. Positive interactions can strengthen circuits associated with trust, empathy, and cooperation, while repeated negative experiences may reinforce patterns of anxiety, defensiveness, or withdrawal. Because these circuits are continually shaped by experience, emotional patterns are not fixed. They evolve based on how individuals engage with others and interpret their social world. The balance between rapid emotional detection and thoughtful regulation is essential for healthy relationships. If the amygdala becomes overly reactive, individuals may experience heightened sensitivity to perceived threats or criticism, leading to defensive behavior. If prefrontal regulation is strong, emotional responses can be interpreted and managed in ways that promote understanding and constructive communication. This balance allows emotions to serve their adaptive function, alerting the brain to meaningful events, while still enabling deliberate, cooperative behavior within social relationships. Human relationships are strongly influenced by specific neurochemicals that shape how the brain experiences connection, trust, and motivation. Among the most important of these chemicals are dopamine and oxytocin, both of which play central roles in reinforcing social bonds and making interactions with others feel rewarding. These neurochemicals operate within interconnected brain circuits that evolve to encourage cooperation, attachment, and long-term social relationships, all of which are essential for psychological and physical well-being. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter deeply involved in motivation, reward, and anticipation. Rather than simply producing pleasure, dopamine signals the brain that something important or valuable is about to occur. In the context of relationships, dopamine becomes highly active during moments of excitement, novelty, and anticipation, such as the early stages of forming a connection with someone new. When individuals receive positive attention, shared laughter, or meaningful interaction, dopamine is released within reward-related areas of the brain, including the ventral tegmental area and the nucleus accumbens. This release strengthens neural circuits that associate the presence of another person with positive outcomes, making the brain more likely to seek future interactions with that individual. The anticipatory nature of dopamine also explains why emotional excitement and curiosity often characterize new relationships. When the brain expects a rewarding social experience, such as seeing a close friend, partner, or loved one, it increases dopamine activity even before the interaction occurs. This anticipatory signal motivates behaviors that maintain and strengthen the relationship, including communication, cooperation, and shared experiences. Over time, repeated positive interactions reinforce these circuits, allowing relationships to transition from novelty-driven excitement to more stable, meaningful bonds. Oxytocin, often referred to as a bonding hormone, complements dopamine by strengthening trust and emotional closeness. Oxytocin is released during various forms of positive social contact, including affectionate touch, eye contact, supportive conversation, and acts of kindness. It is produced in the hypothalamus and released into both the bloodstream and specific brain regions involved in emotional processing and social recognition. Oxytocin increases sensitivity to social cues and enhances the brain's ability to interpret facial expressions, tone of voice, and other signals that convey emotional meaning. One of the most significant effects of oxytocin is its ability to reduce the brain's stress response during positive social interactions. When oxytocin levels rise, activity within the amygdala, particularly its threat detection pathways, can decrease, making individuals feel safer and more relaxed around others. This reduction in perceived threat promotes openness, cooperation, and emotional vulnerability, which are essential components of strong relationships. Oxytocin therefore acts as a stabilizing force that transforms social interactions into experiences associated with comfort, safety, and trust. The interaction between dopamine and oxytocin creates a powerful biological foundation for human bonding. Dopamine drives motivation and excitement towards social engagement, while oxytocin deepens emotional attachment and trust. Together, they strengthen neural circuits that associate relationships with reward and safety. This combination helps explain why supportive relationships are strongly linked to improved mental health, resilience to stress, and overall well-being. These neurochemical systems are also highly responsive to experience. Positive, consistent interactions reinforce the neural pathways associated with connection, making emotional bonds stronger and more stable over time. Conversely, inconsistent or negative social experiences can disrupt these systems, reducing trust and weakening the sense of reward associated with relationships. Because the brain continuously adapts based on social feedback, the quality and consistency of interactions play a critical role in shaping how these neurochemicals influence emotional connection and long-term relational patterns. Human relationships rely heavily on the brain's ability to interpret subtle social signals. Much of emotional communication occurs without explicit words, through facial expressions, tone of voice, body posture, and small movements that convey emotional meaning. The brain is highly specialized for detecting and interpreting these signals, using a network of regions that rapidly analyze social information and translate it into emotional understanding. This ability allows individuals to sense how others feel, respond appropriately, and maintain meaningful relationships. One important structure involved in processing social signals is the superior temporal sulcus. This region of the brain is particularly sensitive to movement and biological cues, such as eye direction, facial expressions, and shifts in body posture. When someone smiles, frowns, or changes their tone of voice, the superior temporal sulcus helps decode these signals and determine their emotional significance. These cues are processed extremely quickly, often within fractions of a second, allowing the brain to respond in real time during social interactions. Closely connected to this process is the mirror neuron system, which plays a crucial role in empathy and emotional understanding. Mirror neurons activate both when a person performs an action and when they observe someone else performing the same action. This mechanism allows the brain to simulate the experiences of others internally. For example, When someone sees another person expressing sadness or joy, similar neural circuits may activate within their own brain, creating a shared emotional experience. This neural simulation helps individuals understand what others might be feeling, even without explicit verbal communication. Empathy emerges from this interaction between perception and simulation. When the brain accurately interprets another person's emotional signals and internally mirrors those states, individuals are better able to respond with compassion, support, or appropriate emotional alignment. Empathy strengthens relationships because it signals to others that their feelings are recognized and understood. When people feel emotionally understood, trust increases and communication becomes smoother, creating stronger and more stable social bonds. Tone of voice is another powerful carrier of emotional information. The human brain is particularly sensitive to changes in vocal patterns such as pitch, rhythm, and intensity. Regions in the auditory cortex work alongside emotional centers like the amygdala to interpret whether a voice conveys warmth, anger, concern, or reassurance. Because vocal tone often carries emotional meaning beyond the literal words being spoken, the brain prioritizes these cues when interpreting social messages. This is why misunderstandings can occur when tone and words send conflicting signals. Body language also contributes significantly to emotional communication. Small gestures such as leaning forward, maintaining eye contact, or shifting posture can communicate interest, openness, or discomfort. The brain integrates these signals with facial and vocal cues to build a complete interpretation of another person's emotional state. This integration occurs across multiple neural networks, allowing individuals to respond quickly and intuitively during interactions. These social perception systems are shaped by experience and learning. The brain becomes better at recognizing emotional signals through repeated social interactions, strengthening the neural pathways responsible for interpreting facial expressions, tone, and behavior. Cultural background, personal history, and social environment all influence how these cues are interpreted. Some individuals may become particularly skilled at detecting subtle emotional signals, while others may require more explicit communication to interpret social situations accurately. The ability to read and respond to social signals is essential for building healthy relationships. When individuals accurately perceive emotional cues and respond with empathy, communication becomes more effective and misunderstandings decrease. This neural capacity for emotional interpretation allows humans to navigate complex social environments, maintain cooperation, and form deep emotional connections with others. Human emotional responses in relationships are deeply influenced by past experiences stored within the brain's memory systems. The brain does not interpret social interactions as entirely new events. Instead, it continuously compares present situations with previous experiences. This process is largely guided by the hippocampus, a brain structure responsible for forming, organizing, and retrieving memories. The hippocampus works closely with emotional centers like the amygdala to link emotional meaning to memories, allowing the brain to quickly evaluate whether a current interaction resembles something positive, negative, safe, or threatening from the past. When individuals experience meaningful emotional events, whether supportive or painful, the brain stores not only the facts of the situation, but also the emotional tone associated with it. Over time, repeated experiences form patterns that shape expectations about how others will behave. For example, if someone grows up in an environment where communication is supportive and reliable, the brain learns to associate relationships with safety and cooperation. In these cases, when similar cues appear in adulthood, the brain is more likely to respond with openness and trust. The amygdala remains relatively calm, allowing the prefrontal cortex to guide thoughtful and balanced responses. In contrast, if earlier experiences involve rejection, unpredictability, or emotional conflict, the brain may develop heightened sensitivity to potential social threats. The amygdala becomes more reactive, quickly interpreting ambiguous cues as signals of danger or rejection. This heightened vigilance can lead individuals to react defensively, withdraw emotionally, or misinterpret neutral interactions as negative. These reactions are not simply personality traits. They reflect learned patterns within neural circuits shaped by repeated past experiences. Memory also influences how individuals interpret subtle emotional signals during conversations and interactions. The hippocampus retrieves relevant memories and provides context to help the brain evaluate the present moment. If someone hears a particular tone of voice or observes a familiar facial expression, the brain rapidly searches for similar patterns in stored memories. This process allows the brain to predict possible outcomes and prepare appropriate responses. However, these predictions are not always accurate, especially if past experiences were limited or emotionally intense. In such cases, the brain may apply outdated interpretations to new situations, affecting how relationships develop. Another important aspect of memory in relationships involves the reinforcement of emotional patterns over time. Each new interaction slightly modifies the brain's existing circuits, strengthening certain associations and weakening others. When positive experiences accumulate, neural pathways linked to trust and emotional security become stronger. This makes future interactions easier and more comfortable as the brain increasingly expects supportive outcomes. Conversely, repeated negative interactions reinforce circuits associated with caution, defensiveness, or emotional distance, shaping long-term relational behavior. The prefrontal cortex plays an important role in moderating how past experiences influence present behavior. While the hippocampus retrieves memories and the amygdala signals emotional significance, the prefrontal cortex can evaluate whether those reactions are appropriate for the current situation. This allows individuals to reconsider automatic interpretations and respond more thoughtfully. For instance, recognizing that a current partner or friend is different from someone in the past can help weaken old emotional patterns and create space for healthier interactions. Neuroplasticity ensures that emotional responses shaped by past experiences are not permanent. With new experiences, reflection, and conscious effort, the brain can update its interpretations of social cues and gradually reshape emotional expectations. Positive and consistent interactions help recalibrate the balance between memory, emotion, and regulation systems, allowing individuals to build relationships that are guided more by present reality than by outdated emotional patterns stored in memory circuits. Stress has a powerful influence on emotional dynamics within relationships because it alters how the brain processes information, regulates emotions, and interprets the behavior of others. When a person experiences stress, the brain activates a system known as the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This system releases stress hormones, particularly cortisol and adrenaline, which prepare the body to respond quickly to perceived challenges or threats. While this response is useful for handling immediate danger, it can significantly affect emotional communication and decision-making during social interactions. When the stress system becomes active, the brain prioritizes rapid reactions over careful evaluation. The amygdala, which plays a key role in detecting potential threats, becomes more sensitive and reactive. Under stress, it can interpret ambiguous social cues, such as a neutral tone of voice or a brief pause in conversation, as signs of criticism, rejection, or hostility. This heightened sensitivity can cause individuals to react defensively or emotionally, even when the situation does not truly require such a response. As a result, conversations that might otherwise be calm and constructive can escalate quickly into misunderstandings or conflict. At the same time, stress temporarily reduces the effectiveness of the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reasoning, impulse control, and emotional regulation. When cortisol levels rise, the communication between the prefrontal cortex and the emotional centers of the brain becomes less efficient. This means individuals may struggle to pause, reflect, or choose thoughtful responses during tense moments. Instead, the brain may default to automatic emotional reactions such as anger, frustration, or withdrawal. These reactions often occur before a person has the chance to fully evaluate what is actually happening in the interaction. Stress also affects attention and perception in ways that can influence relationships. When the brain is in a stressed state, it tends to narrow its focus toward potential threats while ignoring neutral or positive information. This bias can cause individuals to overlook supportive gestures or positive intentions from others, reinforcing negative interpretations of social situations. Over time, repeated exposure to stress can make the brain more likely to anticipate conflict or disappointment in relationships, even when such outcomes are not inevitable. Another important factor is the role of physiological responses during stressful interactions. Increased heart rate, muscle tension, and changes in breathing patterns can intensify emotional experiences, making it more difficult to maintain calm communication. These physical signals are closely connected to the brain's emotional centers, and when they escalate, they can amplify feelings of frustration or anxiety. In many cases, individuals may not even realize that their emotional reactions are being shaped by these internal physiological changes. Despite these challenges, The brain has mechanisms that allow stress responses to be regulated and balanced. When individuals intentionally slow down their breathing, take pauses during conversations, or engage in reflective listening, the prefrontal cortex can regain influence over emotional reactions. These actions help reduce amygdala activation and restore a more balanced state of neural activity. As the stress response decreases, cognitive clarity and emotional stability improve, allowing communication to become more cooperative and understanding. Repeated experiences of calm, supportive interactions can also train the brain to manage stress more effectively within relationships. Over time, the neural pathways responsible for emotional regulation strengthen, making it easier to remain composed during difficult conversations. This adaptive process allows individuals to respond to challenges with greater patience and perspective, supporting healthier emotional dynamics and more resilient social connections. Emotional regulation plays a central role in the stability and quality of human relationships because it determines how individuals respond to emotional signals, disagreements, and moments of stress. While emotions arise automatically through the activity of the brain's limbic system, the ability to regulate those emotions depends largely on the prefrontal cortex. This region of the brain is responsible for evaluating situations, controlling impulses, and guiding behavior in ways that align with long-term goals rather than immediate reactions. In the context of relationships, strong prefrontal regulation allows individuals to pause, interpret emotional cues more accurately, and respond in ways that promote understanding rather than conflict. One of the most important aspects of emotional regulation is awareness of internal emotional states. The brain continuously receives signals from the body about changes in heart rate, breathing patterns, and muscle tension. These physiological signals contribute to the subjective feeling of emotions such as anger, anxiety, excitement, or affection. Regions such as the insular cortex help the brain interpret these bodily signals, allowing individuals to become aware of what they are feeling. This awareness is critical because recognizing emotional states creates the opportunity to regulate them before they influence behavior in unhelpful ways. When emotional awareness is combined with deliberate cognitive control, the prefrontal cortex can reshape how the brain interprets social situations. For example, during a disagreement, the amygdala may initially interpret a comment as criticism or rejection. However, the prefrontal cortex can reevaluate the context and consider alternative explanations, such as misunderstanding or differences in perspective. This process, often referred to as cognitive reappraisal, reduces the intensity of the emotional reaction and allows individuals to maintain a calm and constructive approach to communication. Consistent patterns of supportive behavior also contribute significantly to emotional stability in relationships. The brain relies heavily on predictability when evaluating whether an environment is safe. When individuals repeatedly experience honesty, reliability, and emotional availability from others, neural circuits associated with trust and security become stronger. These circuits involve interactions between the prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, and limbic structures, which together form a stable representation of the relationship as safe and supportive. This sense of predictability reduces unnecessary activation of the stress system, allowing individuals to interact with greater openness and emotional comfort. Communication practices can further strengthen emotional regulation within relationships. Listening carefully, allowing pauses before responding, and acknowledging another person's perspective activate neural networks involved in empathy and perspective taking. These processes help shift the brain away from defensive reactions and toward cooperative problem solving. Over time, repeated experiences of respectful and thoughtful communication reinforce neural pathways that support patience, understanding, and emotional balance. Emotional regulation is also influenced by habits and environmental factors. Adequate sleep, regular physical activity, and consistent routines support healthy functioning of the prefrontal cortex and reduce excessive reactivity within emotional centers of the brain. When these physiological foundations are stable, the brain is better able to manage emotional challenges during social interactions. Conversely, fatigue or chronic stress can weaken regulatory control, making it more difficult to maintain calm communication. Importantly, emotional regulation within relationships is not a static ability, but a skill that strengthens through practice and experience. Each time individuals successfully pause, reflect, and respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively, The neural pathways responsible for regulation become stronger. Over time, this repeated practice transforms emotional regulation into a more automatic process, allowing individuals to navigate complex social situations with greater stability, empathy, and clarity. In conclusion, the science of emotions and relationships reveals that human connection is deeply rooted in biological systems that govern perception, memory, stress, and regulation. By understanding how these systems operate and by practicing habits that support emotional awareness and thoughtful communication, individuals can shape healthier patterns of interaction. Over time, these practices strengthen neural circuits associated with empathy, trust, and cooperation, creating relationships that are more stable, supportive, and resilient in the face of challenges. In conclusion, emotions and relationships are guided by complex interactions between brain circuits, hormones, memory systems, and conscious regulation. The way individuals perceive social cues, interpret past experiences, and manage emotional reactions directly shapes the quality of their connections with others. By strengthening emotional awareness, practicing thoughtful communication, and creating consistent patterns of trust and support, the brain gradually builds stronger neural pathways associated with empathy, stability, and cooperation. Over time, these biological and behavioral processes work together to form deeper, healthier relationships that support emotional well-being, resilience, and long-term human connection.